Okay, here's one. This makes sense in my head.
I'm excited to hear this one.
And how challenging would it be for an individual to maintain their own F1 hybrid creation? I grow, this hypothetical me. I have a tomato, and I know from past experience that if I take the pollen from tomato A and put it on the flower from tomato B, that resulting seed is my own unique hybrid fruit seed. If somebody did this, which is how a lot of these tomato varieties came about, this is, I think, much more advanced. You can comment on that. Where does this fall on the skill level, the experience level? Is this something somebody you think could do relatively easily? Is this more challenging than I'm making it out to be? When I put this out into the world, what are your first thoughts?
So I would say this is advanced level seed growing, but I would say it's also easier than you might think, but it's also a process. And I would also say if you have never grown seed, this is not where you should start, but you might find it interesting. And most market growers grow hybrids, so it's good to know a bit how where the process comes from. So just to give some definitions to make sure people are on the same page, there's two terms that are used usually in opposition to each other: an open pollinated variety and a hybrid variety. And an open pollinated variety would be a variety that if you keep the seed from that variety and it's not beside another variety that could accidentally cross pollinate with it, but if you avoid accidental cross pollination and you keep that seed, you get the same thing the next year. So that's an open pollinated variety. And that's easy, easy-ish to keep, just it's a normal seed keeping challenges, seed saving challenges, but you don't have to worry too much that you're not going to get something different later on. Now, a hybrid is there'll be two lines, seed lines, or two varieties that are crossed together to give a seed that's 50% genes from one, 50% from the other. And that's the hybrid. And when this is done in sort of a controlled situation, and the parents, usually the hybrid is fairly uniform and gives you kind of specific results that you're looking for. But if you harvest the seed from the hybrid, you wind up getting a diversity of different stuff, all kinds of combinations of the parents. So you have to always go back to recrossing the parents to get that hybrid seed. So those are the definitions. Now, if you are going to grow hybrid seed, there's a couple challenges that you'll have. The first is you need to know which plants to cross together to get the good result, because not every cross is going to give as good a hybrid. So you're going to need to try a lot of different things and see what the results are to get the crop, to get the result. Now, let's say you know what the parents are going to be. The next challenge is making sure that you have the right plant providing the pollen to the right plant receiving the pollen. And that, depending on the crop, it's easier or harder. So if you were growing corn has these tassels on the top that produce pollen, and they fall down, and then the ear is what receives the pollen and makes the seed. So if you grow one row of plant that's going to be the pollen producer and another row of plants that are going to be the pollen receiver, you can go down, and when the pollen receivers start to tassel, you just cut off all the tassels. And so so they can't produce pollen, and therefore that all the pollen that has fallen on the ears came from the other row. You have to do it, but it's still fairly easy. Now, if you're going to work with a tomato, tomatoes have hermaphrodite flowers where they produce pollen and receive pollen in the same flower. And most tomato flowers are self-pollinated. So if you want to create that hybrid, you have to go in as the flower is maturing, before it's ready, and you have to open out the flower and remove the stamens, which are what has the pollen on it. so that it's not going to give pollen to itself. And then you're taking the pollen from another plant and you're going to have to add it using probably like a little not toothbrush, a paintbrush. And so it's technical to do it. There's some skill that's needed, but you have to be very precise, and that's a tricky thing. So it's definitely within any farmer's skill sets to learn how, or the potential to learn that skill set. It's not that hard, but I would question whether, like, considering you have to know the right parents from the beginning, I'm not sure if that part is going to be so fun to do and master unless you're sure the results are going to happen. And in the commercial seed trade, a lot of the pollination of plants like this, of peppers or of tomatoes, which do need to be manually emasculated and then pollinated, that happens in places where labor is very cheap because they don't want the seed to be too expensive. So by outsourcing that, into for other countries, it's a way to keep the seed fairly affordable for growers. Whereas if it was being done in North America, it'd be a more expensive, much more expensive because the labor's, we have very different labor standards here. And so I can go a lot more into it, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds. So
No,
you
I
should
like
tell me
that.
if I'm in the right direction for the answer.
Yeah, that's good. So anytime anybody sees F1 hybrid in the seed catalog on a packet, they should at least know a lot of human labor went into making that seed possible.
Yes. And now there are some cases where there's what's called cytoplasmic male sterility. So there's sometimes some plants, they won't produce pollen. And so through their breeding systems, they can have individuals that don't need that manual removal of the pollen bearing plants. And so it makes it much easier and cheaper to produce, but it's not all plants. And I think that's something that a lot of plant breeders are always looking for, those individuals, because it make the process easier. But in a lot of cases, it's still done by hand. And some of it, I should say, like in the case of cucurbits, like zucchini or squash, and the case of corn, a lot of it still is done in North America. And so, like, you could be so. So this is not quite what you asked, but my first goal at the Seed Farmer book is to promote people to grow seed for their own farm. But there is, a chapter on selling seed, and it is something you can get into, growing bulk seed for other seed companies. But you can also become somebody that a seed company will send you 2 lines and they'll give you directions and you do the cross pollination to produce the hybrid seed. And so the case of cucurbits like squash and zucchini, this is something that I know people in North America who are doing this as a way to generate revenue. So it's totally feasible as an operation. This is not something, in this case, you're not like doing the research and developing your own hybrids. You would just be, you're doing the labor part, and you get the seed, you grow it separately, or you grow the separate lines the way they explained it, and you make the cross, and then you'd send the seed back to the seed company.